The best villains in terms of successfully being villains are the ones that can pretty much never be stopped. In Marvel Comics, there are quite a handful. I'm Adam Andrews, and today on Top 10 Nerd, it's the top 10 Immortal Marvel Villains. Coming in at number 10 today is Ultron. How can you really pass away if you were never technically alive to begin with? Over time, Ultron has definitely taken on more squishy bodies, like when he became half Hank Pym, but for the most part, Ultron as a villain has been pretty much entirely unkillable, if you could even describe him that way. A large part of this has to do with his program transmitter. Located in his head cavity, the program transmitter can project Ultron's entire 3.2 terabyte memory and personality system into some computer systems. He can beam part or all of his programming into remote locations, such as computers or alternate robotic bodies, and has used this ability to create and control entire armies of himself, to move himself into other bodies if he's destroyed, and he's even used it to implant directives into his own creations to rebuild Ultron if he is ever actually destroyed. But that alone is a pretty hard thing enough to do, because normally Ultron's outer shell is made entirely of adamantium, one of the strongest metals in the entire Marvel universe. On top of that though, Ultron is almost always improving himself, upgrading his body, programming, and abilities, while also spreading his influence further and deeper into the cosmos. Number 9. The One Below All. The One Below All is a relatively recent addition to the comics, but the idea of the entity isn't, as we have known about the One Above All for a while, and his mere existence begs the question of who inhabits the opposite side of the spectrum. Thanks to the Immortal Hulk storyline, we now know it is utterly terrifying. He resides in the below place, and his power has been manifesting itself for decades in the form of gamma mutates like the Hulk. In the story, we do get brief glimpses of what could actually happen if the embodiment of destruction and nothingness were to be set loose on the multiverse. Basically, the One Below All completely takes over the body of the Immortal Hulk, and using this body, he brings an end to the current version of the multiverse, destroying literally everything and everyone over billions of years, including the very essence of life and the multiverse itself. So that when the multiverse is rebirthed into its new version, it is the last time it can truly even happen. With the Hulk / One Below All / Breaker of Worlds consuming everything to grow to a massive planetary scale, wiping out all of existence. But thanks to some time/reality traveling bugs, this does not come to pass, but it could, and that's all you need to know. Number 8. Apocalypse. If it wasn't for his goal of mutant domination and evolution, Apocalypse would vaporize the X-Men whenever he wanted to, and even if that wasn't how he did it, he has the capacity to wipe out the X-Men in a whole handful of ways. For starters, Apocalypse is what is called an external. These are beings, mostly mutants, who are immortal, share a psychic connection, and who can revive themselves. So he can just never be permanently taken down, and he has been around for about 5,000 years. Apocalypse's original mutant ability was to be able to control his own molecular structure, but over time, with the mentality of survival of the fittest, he has enhanced his abilities and even gained new ones through the use of celestial technology, celestial armor, and at least 2 techno-organic viruses. He can do a lot with his molecular manipulation, including heal himself and turn his limbs into simple melee weapons, but also technologically complex weapons like plasma cannons. But I think the most impressive thing he can do is consciously and subconsciously grant himself a huge amount of mutant powers at will. That makes him too much for most heroes to handle already, and we haven't even talked about his celestial energy manipulation, his psionic abilities, or any of his countless horsemen of the apocalypse, all of whom were given power boosts by this unstoppable mutant. Number 7. Maestro. The Incredible Hulk has certainly been through the ringer in his decorated career, but few versions of the character are the living embodiment of that fact, like the Maestro. An alternate version of Bruce Banner from an apocalyptic future, the Maestro is far more intense and complex than his Earth 616 counterpart. The best way to describe Maestro is to say that he is basically a smarter, older, villainous version of Dr. Bruce Banner with all the powers and abilities of the original, but with a touch more nuclear radiation. Now, I don't know if you know, but the Hulk is actually immortal. As a gamma mutate with a connection to the below place, Bruce Banner and Hulk learned he possessed the ability to commandeer his own recovery rate. One time, Hulk had been pulled apart and put into several different jars, only to literally compel his own body to come back together by sheer force of will. The Hulk, and by extension Maestro, is capable of regenerating damaged or destroyed areas of his entire body with much greater speed and efficiency efficiency than any of us can do. The Hulk was also able to systematically regenerate his internal organs and tissues, and was also able to literally rip off a large fraction of his own head, allowing it to completely regrow. The Maestro himself was able to molecularly rebuild his own body after being atomized. The Hulk has survived to be the only living human being left on the entire Earth in Hulk the End, so immortality for this guy is a big old checkmark. Number 6. Agatha Harkness. Like a few of these villains, when we first met Agatha Harkness in Fantastic Four number 95 from October 1969, she was already elderly. She started out as the nanny for the newly born Franklin Richards, and using her magical powers, she even saved the Fantastic Four from the Frightful Four, a handful of other villains, and also helped Franklin when his powers first started to emerge. But she went on to have an interesting relationship with the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, but also her mother Natalia Maximoff. That's because this sweet nanny Agatha is actually an incredibly ancient sorcerer who was around to remember the sinking of Atlantis nearly 18,500 years ago, and she was probably the most powerful of the original witches during the Salem witch trials, an event that she actually supported as she thought it would cull the weak magic users who held them all collectively back. While Agatha is not technically immortal, her use of magic coupled with her extended lifespan has made her basically the same thing. Number 5. Kang the Conqueror. Kang is a little bit of an interesting pick for this list, as he totally can be stopped and has been multiple times. Thanks to the advanced time period he comes from, Nathaniel Richards has an increased lifespan, making him look like 40 years old when he's actually 70 years old. That's fine, that doesn't make him unstoppable or immortal. What makes him immortal is a couple of things. For starters, as most people know, Kang has a huge relationship with time. A version of this guy exists at almost all moments of the time stream, and not just one version of him, as there have been Kangs from different universes that have shown up as well. So not only can Nathaniel Richards show up at any point in the time stream in any of his numerous identities that all have their own long history, but his alternate universe versions are almost always set to make an appearance in his place. And then, on top of that, until recently, Nathaniel had the ability to transfer his consciousness to another body whenever he did actually pass away. So, yeah, he's kind of immortal. Number 4. That which endures. That which endures is basically like a bacteria. All the way back at the very beginning of life, billions of years ago, when the first cells split on Earth and multicellular life forms began to exist, that which endures attached itself to the resulting organism and has been multiplying and sticking with whatever species it determined was the most dominant in order to ensure its own survival. It basically chooses which species are successful, and a small part of it exists in every member of that species. At first, that was dinosaurs, and then eventually humans. Around every 100,000 years, that which endures will just pop up in a large number of that species, look around, and see if any other species is beginning to come out on top, which is when it would jump ship to that new species. When it did this in Avengers West Coast number 47 in 1989, it noticed that there was a super cool and powerful evolution in Homo sapiens known as Homo superior, aka the mutants. That which endures chose the Scarlet Witch as the first mutant it would try to jump to, using her to destroy Homo sapiens. Luckily though, the Great Lakes Initiative alongside Vision were able to stop this from happening, and we haven't really heard anything of this semi-sentient organism ever since. Number 3. The Beast. The ninja clan known as the Hand has had many run-ins with different heroes over the years, but none of those heroes have had as much interaction with the shadowy group as Daredevil. His mentor, Stick, and his sometimes girlfriend, Elektra, have history with the clan as well, and he's never been particularly fond of them. But when he seemed to secure control over the clan, he decided to put their skills to good use. He moved them to Hell's Kitchen and started up a headquarters and prison known as Shadowland. He changed the Hand into what he thought was a force for good, but as his time with the Hand went on, he seemed to be the one who was changing, becoming more aggressive and drastic with his methods of crime fighting. He started to butt heads with other heroes and even became responsible for the passing of his adversary, Bullseye, again. Now it turns out that this brutal new Daredevil was actually being possessed by an ancient demon called the Beast, who is the source of the Hand's mystical powers and has been the reason the clan was as morally dubious as it is. Daredevil was secretly manipulated by the Snake Root, a small faction of the Hand that worshipped the Beast. They manipulated Daredevil into undergoing the ritual of the Black Flower. So when Daredevil removed the problem of Bullseye from existence, it completed the ritual and the Beast possessed him and corrupted the people of Hell's Kitchen until Iron Fist exorcised the demon from that. Number 2. Uranos. As you might be able to gather from their name, Eternals are, well, eternal, meaning they are immortal, and some of them are scary powerful. The Eternal known as Uranos first ever appeared in Marvel What If number 24 in September of 1980, in a story that explained the origins of the Eternals. In this story, Uranos is trying to convince his brother, Kronos, that the Eternals should use their massive amounts of power to just take over the world. He believed the Eternals would best fulfill their duties if they exterminated both the deviants and the humans on Earth, all life outside the universe as well, and imprison the Celestials, but his brothers, Kronos and Oceanus, luckily disagreed, sparking the Eternals' civil war. The war culminated in his defeat and banishment to the planet Uranus. Surprise though, this isn't what actually happened. The Uranos who was banished to another planet was actually a clone of the real Uranos who was banished to the exclusion, as he tied his own passing to the destruction of Earth, meaning if he goes, we all go. Which is why he was sent to the exclusion, only able to leave an hour at a time at the discretion of the Prime Eternal. Most recently, Uranos was used by Druig to wipe out a massive amount of the mutant population when a war between the Eternals and the mutants broke out. And finally, in at number 1 today is Shadow King. Amal Farouk was a pretty nasty mutant that Charles Xavier had a run-in with in Cairo way back in the day before he started the X-Men. Amal attacked Xavier and then tried to convince Charles to partner with him in his nefarious ways. Luckily, Charles refused, challenged Farouk to a psychic duel, and won, which seemed to take Farouk's life, and he moved on to create the X-Men in order to combat evil mutants in the world like Farouk himself. What no one knew until about 150 issues later is that Farouk was actually merged with a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of human consciousness who had been possessing various individuals since the dawn of human history, called the Shadow King. Years and years later, the Shadow King and Farouk, who had been floating around in the astral plane, made a move to attack Xavier again, taking over the new mutant Karma due to her own mutant ability of possession, making her vulnerable. He was eventually defeated, but this multiversal entity would go on to possess a whole number of powerful people, mainly telepaths like Marvel Girl and Psylocke, whose energy the Shadow King would feed off of. But there have been many others who have been possessed, corrupted, and misled by this powerful telepathic entity in not only the 616 universe, but all over the multiverse. And that's all we've got. I'm Adam Andrews. I will catch you nerds on the flippy flop here on Top 10 Nerd, but until that time, stay safe and peace out, nerds.